Welcome to the Oh So Spurs podcast. We have a semi-final afoot. Enjoy it. These don't come along often, but we're going to be discussing that today, the predicted lineup. Hopefully we can see this one through, despite a very cocky Liverpool fan base from what I'm gathering online. Some people have already booked their tickets for the final. Let's make sure they've wasted their money. And we will also be going over a summary of the January transfer window and how we believe it went. Did we do enough? Did we do more than we expected, or was it somewhere in between? And to discuss it with us today, we have a guest on who is the author of El Gringo's Once in a Lifetime. Yep, you can find that on Amazon, which John wrote. And he's also been part of the club in many ways. He used to be a part of the Tottenham Tribute Trust, which you should check out, that's taking care of ex-players who are not perhaps in a financial position of a modern footballer and need support in today's world. But how are you, John?
Well, thank you. I fresh back from 2 successive victories. So yes,
Always helps.
in good spirits.
Excellent. And we have from our regulars, the famous Deej. How are you, Deej?
Doing good. Doing good.
Good. Very calm doing good. Is that doing good because you're relieved with how things are going after back-to-back wins?
Yeah, it's a doing good because I no longer have to feel like I'm banging my head against a wall watching Tottenham not sign anybody for what 30 something days. We got 2 in at the basically at the buzzer. I will talk about that a little bit more later then.
Well, should we start with the transfer window? I think that's
Sure,
a
why
logical
not?
place to go, and then we'll work our way towards the future. But we'll start with the past. John, were you like to write on Spurs as a hobby as well? And I'm sure you've had some thoughts over how you would describe this transfer window. But in a summary, how did you feel about it?
If we take ourselves back to sort of mid-December when the injury crisis was in with us, it still is in many respects, but at that time, Ange had said the cavalry's not far away, 1st of January, and it started fantastically well when we brought a keeper in, and then we had days of inactivity that turned into weeks and had almost ended up being a month of inactivity. So I think it's great that we've been able to bring a couple of players in at the end of the window, but we've lost a lot of headwind in January by not bringing people in earlier. Is how I feel, and probably we haven't quite filled the gaps that we would have liked to have done with still having 4 competitions ahead of us.
Yes. Fortunately, in one of those competitions, so there's only 2 games to go, which we'll be discussing shortly for us. But Deej, do you have a similar feeling to John there, or anything to add as a brief summary of it before we go into the weeds?
Yeah, I mean, like I've made my opinion pretty clear on the Matisse Tell transfer. If we can manage to convert that loan into a permanent one, it would be something I'd be very, very happy with. But yeah, I think that the main issue with this window has been timing. We have had we've been in a crisis basically since, I don't know, October, November, definitely in December, and all through January, and we just haven't, I think, acted with the required speed to kind of like assuage the those issues. So I think if we look back at this in like March, April, maybe we'll be like, yeah, we brought in some good players, and it's good for us like in the long term maybe, but it kind of did require us to essentially throw away any hope we had of finishing anywhere respectably in the league, which I don't know, maybe that's worth it, maybe it's not.
But timing aside, because I don't think anyone's going to dispute we should have moved faster, we just look at the players we brought in. If we had brought in the same players that we have finished the window with on January 1st, would you be happy with how the window went, John? Or would you still say another body or 2 was required in that window?
I think another body or 2 were required. The centre back we've brought in felt a bit of a panic buy because we couldn't get 1 or 2 others, and he was on his way to Wolverhampton Wanderers, and I felt sorry for the Wolves fans. We've had that done to us, and it's not very pleasant, but it does happen in football. So pleased to get him in. He's when you look at his history, he looks to. He likes a yellow and a red card, but other than that, he looks a very solid defender. Tell, I'm not altogether convinced by. There's mixed reports. He seems. I've watched a couple of videos of him. He's got a very powerful shot, and he doesn't need much of a backlift as well. And the ball flies into the net. But when you read some other stuff around his hold up play and maybe defensive nous and positioning, it leaves a little bit to be desired. But he's only 19, so there's a lot of raw potential there, and we seem to be full to the brim with raw potential. And I go back to the summer window where there was talk that Ange wanted 3 players and he got Solanke, but he didn't get the 2 other first teamers that he wanted. And I still feel we've suffered for that in the first half of the season, and I'm a little bit concerned that we might suffer again in the second half of the season.
Dees, do you feel like Ange sits down with Johan Langer and Daniel Levy and says, guys, I need the Beatles, and they go, you're having S Club 7. You need to turn them into the Beatles. Or are you? But you were a big fan of Matisse Tell, right? So what's your view on
like I said,
the main? And we did sign 6 players, by the way, guys. But we'll get into that in a second, not 3.
Yeah.
The 3 main ones, I should say.
I think a lot of this. I think a lot of my opinion on this window will kind of have to be withheld until the summer to see whether or not Tell works out for us on the loan, and 2, whether or not we're able to convert that loan to a permanent deal. Because if we get him as a loan, it's like good because it's a warm body, and realistically, I'd take anybody at this point to kind of allow for rotation. But he's the kind of player that, especially for the reported loan fee that we're paying, you kind of want him to be you kind of want him to be in your squad for more than a year, so you can kind of see that potential that I think he has. And if he leaves in the summer, we're only going to see a very, very raw version of him. Like you said, he's got issues with hold up play, some of his defensive positioning, and he's often accused of rushing a shot. But like I've said earlier, I think that might just be because he's trying his hardest to make an impact in very limited minutes. So that might be something I'm willing to look past. But yeah, I do think that the calculus on how many players we needed probably changed with the news of the Dragusin injury, which is unfortunate. The timing of it is just really unfortunate that we seem to have not really confirmed that it was an issue that would hold him out for the season until basically deadline day. So, and especially now that it seems like Van de Ven's having another setback, I do think that it would have been nice to get in another center back, but I can appreciate that the club maybe didn't have the like, you can't bring in a center back if both of those players are healthy on February 1st, because then we're just gonna have too many players, and you're gonna have players that are unhappy and wanting for minutes. But now that we don't have 1, maybe 2 of them for a considerable period of time, it does kind of change it. But like I said, I can appreciate that it wasn't necessarily something that the club were even aware of last week.
It does feel like, I know there's conspiracy theories on why we went for Gahey. Some people have said we bid £70 million to shut up the fans on social media, but I just can't see a world in which Daniel Levy sits around worrying about what someone said about him on Twitter, to the point he throws £70 million at another club and goes, please don't accept it, but it just makes me look good. I just can't see that world. That feels like conjecture to me. But that more feels like, we've lost a centre-back for the season, and we may lose another one for a number of weeks now. We might need to pull forward one of those summer targets into January on the last day if we can. We throw a bunch of money at it, and the other selling club goes, are you joking? We've got no time to find anyone to replace our centre-back, and we don't want to risk a relegation fight. Thank you very much. So we know we'll get the money anyway in the summer. Go find someone else. And then there just was no one else that would A, be available, B, be the level required, and C, have a club willing to sell them. So we just found ourselves in a situation where we left a little bit too much to do at the end, but some of it was out of our control, I guess, to be in some defence of the club. But there was these, you mentioned a lot of raw talent, John. earlier, we have seemed to have plucked some outstanding prospects again, but this time off clubs who would typically be deemed as bigger clubs in Liverpool and Manchester City than us. Are you excited by, well, I hate to have to say it, but in 3 to 5 years' time, when these players start hitting, the motors start rolling, we should have a brilliant squad, shouldn't we? Or is it a bit too far ahead to get excited for right now?
Yeah, we've gone back to the model that we used to previously run, and we ran it successfully, and then we sort of went away from that and tried to buy expensive plug in and play type players, which cost us a lot of money, not just in transfer fees but wages, and ultimately we've had some pretty big disasters in and I'm not sure as a club we can afford that in the same way as some of the oligarchs or the old clubs were able to previously. So I get the model. I just would like to see a little bit more balance towards the here and now. Um, I think we've got some fantastically talented players, and who would have believed that when we signed Archie Gray in the summer that he would be a stalwart in the back of our in in a in a centre back position, and he's done fantastically well, and I agree with Ange that in a year or two we will reap the benefits of these. Of course, unless we can get ourselves up to the higher echelons of the table and be challenging, then these so-called bigger clubs will come calling, and as we've seen in the past.
Well, you're a home and away season ticket holder, and you've been a season ticket holder for how many years now? Or you didn't always have to have a season ticket to go to Spurs. So I said, how long have you been going regularly to Spurs? Do you say, John?
I would say well, the first time I went was when I was 8 years old, which was in, dare I say, 1967. So a long, long time ago. And I've started to go regularly when I was 15 years of age. So I'm 65 now. So 50 years of this.
And you have seen various models. You have seen the not getting everything wrong model. You've seen the getting stuff right for a period of time. You've seen all these various shifts. From someone like my perspective, like I've been through that whole cycle like you, so it's good to get your perspective on this. Do you feel what was the most successful model you saw us have out of that whole era? And do you think we need the model we're on now as the right one, or do you feel there's another model that you have witnessed Spurs do in the past that made us more successful that we should be having? Because you've got polarized fans, right? You've got some saying the model is build this beautiful stadium, spend like Real Madrid, go get the world's best. Others would say that's, for various reasons, that's not achievable. We need to be somewhere in the middle where you go get all the best kids in the world. But where's your head with what you think's the right way to approach it?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpick there. I, in terms of success, in success, if you say, well, trophy success, the most enjoyable time for winning trophies was the early 80s, and that was a fantastic time. We got to the point where, have we got to go to Wembley again, for a charity shield or whatever, which seems absurd now, but at the time we were playing at Wembley 2 or 3 times a season around that time, and it was a great period with the Hoddle and Ardiles and Villa, and we really were a big club, big club. That when we signed Ardiles and Villa, that was front page headline news, and and again perversely under Scholar in the late 80s, we became a very big club again. Um, and he just, unfortunately, he overstretched us into non-footballing areas of sportswear that just about bankrupted us, and that was very unfortunate because it came at the just as we were almost bankrupt, and Sugar came in, who didn't really have a clue but say about football when he first came in, but he did save the club, and that this was at the time that Sky took over, and we got a little bit left behind, in truth, with scouting networks and that type of thing. So when Enoch came in, they've done a fantastic job for the club. And they've taken us into the top 10 in Deloitte's on a regular basis financially. We've got world-class training facilities and a football stadium. And we had a wonderful period under Pochettino. And that, again, was one of my favourite eras. The Redknapp time was fun, but under Pochettino, we got so close so many times on a shoestring budget as well, playing great football with a mix of youth and ready-made players. And he seemed able to develop the youth. And I think, other than the early 80s, the Pochettino era was probably my favourite. And I was gutted when we didn't back him and we sacked him, and I was gutted when we didn't re-employ him. Not everybody would say bring somebody back who's left, but that was a really, really big decision to sack Pochettino. And where we are now, um, I'm hoping we've saw pragmatism from Ange in the two big games in the Carabao Cup against Liverpool and Manchester City, where we didn't go gung ho. We sat back and we managed to beat Manchester City and beat Liverpool with those tactics. He didn't transfer those into league games, and we suffered enormously. And what I saw looking ahead almost to Thursday, what we saw on Sunday was a much more pragmatic approach, and it was enjoyable. We came away from the stadium feeling like we'd seen a normal football match and a victory, which was enjoyable.
I think
So
there's a misconception that that Ange doesn't ever change. I think he plays on that a bit. The own reputation he has, because we've seen it. I think we've seen 3 or 4 different formations, and I've definitely seen games where I've thought, hey, I think it's very easy to go back to that Chelsea game. You still find commentators doing it like, yeah, but do you remember when Spurs against Chelsea had 9 men and had all these men up on? It's like they keep going back to that point. I'm like, that was 2 years ago now, nearly. Like he has had about 40 games in between where we didn't do that. But I think if you don't watch Spurs regularly, you just remember the crazy moments. But Deej, do you agree, John, from your experience so far following Spurs? Do you think this model of going to the youth approach in these windows is going to pay dividends, but we need to sprinkle in a bit more seniority amongst it? Or are you all in on buying all the best kids in the world and biding your time for turning Spurs into the Spurnabow and taking over football? What's your...
No, I definitely do think that there needs to be a bit of senior leadership in the club. Obviously, if there isn't one, then you've kind of just got a bunch of kids on the field, and you need that kind of calming presence to be the voice of reason, the club captain, whatever. Also, the kinds of players who know what it's like to have been in a title race, to have won a trophy, what have you. Those kind of players are players that you you can't get that experience without being there first. And those kinds of players, I think once you've been there, you know how to act in a manner that is, I'd say, you're more calm, you're more comfortable, you're not going to make as many mistakes, you're not going to be as scared of messing up as maybe as someone who hasn't been there before. So definitely having that mixture of experience and the youth that will hopefully pay dividends for us like it has in the past, will continue. We'll do well, but I kind of do agree. I do wish we could bring in a couple more. I do wish we could bring a couple of senior players in, as well as 18, 19-year-olds.
It's such a tough one for Spurs though, because I think we saw last window that it's different when we were under Poch and we were flying. You could turn the heads, understandably, of very good players at a certain age, like mid-20s. We saw in the last window, we were almost laughed off by some of them. Maybe laughed off's unfair. Maybe if a player is deemed to be good enough to be at a Manchester City or a Liverpool, or a Real Madrid or a Barcelona or a PSG or a Bayern Munich, they would likely be quite happy to sit tight rather than move to Spurs in a January transfer window and see what happens in the summer. So it seemed that way anyway. I don't know if you guys agree. That's how I felt. It felt in that window because we're in 15th and there's context to why. I feel like you have to do a lot more convincing to get those players. So the alternative is you can go to Bournemouth and rip a Solanke off them. And Solanke, I think, is a really good player. Really like him. But I do think that's partly the reason he'd move is he's not going to get a move to Manchester City. He's not going to get a move to Liverpool. He's not going to get a move to Chelsea or Real Madrid. He's a very good, dependable player, but not quite that caliber of player that maybe we think we should bring in. Is that fair, guys, or am I being a little bit pessimistic and making excuses for the youngsters?
This window in particular, it would have been a really difficult sell, as you say. We were sixth from bottom, actually fifth from bottom on Saturday night, and so attracting players at the end of a window when we're so low in the table, because unless we go and win the Europa League, we're not going to get Champions League next year, and players at top clubs want to play in the Champions League, and so they're looking 18 months forward as a minimum then, unless we can pull the rabbit out the hat. But then history says that we don't win trophies either at the moment. So and the atmosphere around the stadium and and around social media, I'm sure players pick up on these things, and a lot of our players get injured, and there's concerns as to whether it's the tactics or whether it's just a big coincidence that we're getting so many injuries. So I agree with you. I think it was a really difficult sell this time, and with Tell and the size of the loan fee and the fact that he's apparently got a big say, although we've got an option to buy, he's got a big say in whether he comes or not. Suggests that we weren't in a strong negotiating position there.
No. And I think turning around the Matisse Tell signing is the highlight for me, because if we'd finished that window without him, I think we'd come out the window going, that was a little bit disastrous. We really needed that attacker. But coming out with him suddenly made me feel like maybe we did enough. I'd have liked more, but maybe we did enough to limp through that window and give a squirt of energy into the second half of the season, given that other players are due to return in a couple of weeks. But talking of games we need energy for, guys, we've got Liverpool on Thursday. I think we've been blessed with having been in so many semi-finals over the past 10 years that maybe we don't appreciate them enough recently. But how are you guys, Deej, how are you feeling about that game? Do you think Ange will set up the same as he did against Brentford and go for a slightly more counter-attack type vibe? And do you see Matisse Tell being chucked into the lineup?
I think that it'll be interesting to see how he plays. I think it'll probably be pretty similar to the way we played the first leg, where we're definitely not as all-out attack as we have been in the past. I think we'll definitely be a bit more pragmatic about it, especially it being the second leg of a semifinal where we have a 1-goal lead. So if we draw, we're chilling. That being said, I think Liverpool will set up as to be more attacking from the get-go, which given their attacking talent is something that isn't to be taken lightly. So I think that our plan for the game will probably change depending on, if they score. I mean, obviously that's the case, but I think that it'll be interesting to see how long we can keep them from scoring, essentially, because we still do have like a makeshift backline, and that's not something that is good to hear when you're going up against Liverpool. I know we beat them 1-0 at our place, but I'd like to cast our minds a little bit further back to the last time we played them before that, and think about just how bad that game was. So that's what they're capable of doing. So I think that Ange will take that into account. So I don't think he'll set up like Burnley or anything. I don't think we'll be set up in a way to like 11 men behind the ball at all times. but I do think we'll definitely we'll have more than one. Like we'll be way more cognizant of defending, I think, than I think he sets up in his normal system. In terms of Tell, I think that Matisse Tell is someone who may feature on the bench, but I definitely don't see him starting this early. The only person I could see Danso starting just out of necessity, depending on where Van de Ven is on Thursday.
Which is the big mystery. I saw someone fell for obviously a jokey tweet today. They sent it to me. It said Mickey Van de Ven has been scheduled for a hamstring transplant, and it was all kicking off in this WhatsApp group. And I was like, "You do realise there's no such thing?" Guys, like, yeah, it is. You can transplant hamstrings. You don't know anything. I think, oh my gosh, you've just been completely. It did give me some faith that rumours can start from absolute rubbish, and this whole Van de Ven injury has come from someone insinuating he'd had a setback but didn't really know, and it's sparked into his season being over. So there's still a small glimmer of hope that he appears in the starting lineup. But John, do you think you'll see Kevin Danso starting in the game, given if Van de Ven is injured? Do you think it'll be Danso at centre-back?
I'm not sure. I'm 50-50 on it because Davis has done remarkably well since he's come back into the team, and he's an unsung hero who, for years, we sort of maybe castigated as a left back. But on Sunday, as some of my friends that I went down with noted, he was talking constantly with Archie Gray alongside him and marshalling the back four, as was Bentancur in midfield, to be fair. And I think Davies could well start. Obviously, Van de Ven would come in if he's fit, but if he isn't, I'm actually quite comfortable with Davies at left centre back, and I guess it's Archie Gray or Danso, and again, I think Archie Gray deserves his chance in that position, and it would probably be a step too far to throw him into midfield when we haven't really seen how he performs in midfield. Again, it might be a little bit too early for Danso. Maybe Sunday might be a more realistic option. The one thing I would say is the emergence of Jed Spence as a fullback, and he'll be playing left back. I think will be a big factor because in the first game he did a great job on Salah, who is their most dangerous player, and if he can do a similar job in the away leg, then I think we've got a reasonable chance.
Yeah, I go into that game thinking, look what we did in the home leg, and weirdly, our defensive record is better away from home. We have the best. We have statistically we exceeded the least goals away from home in the Premier League, I believe, which is just every time I say this every episode because it just still staggers me that that's still a thing, and it always makes me scream at the television when a pundit's saying, Spurs could concede 4 today, against Brentford. I'm like, you do realise we have the best away defensive record in the league. What are you backing that up with, aside from a narrative? And yes, on the eye test, you keep seeing Pedro Porro stranded 10 yards of 10 yards of space around someone on the back post. But for whatever reason, we managed to keep these incoming goals to a low number, and we've only lost one game by more than a goal all season, which does imply that we do something right, and we seem to do particularly. Well, I'm not going to jinx it, but if we can keep it tight like we did in that first leg, I don't see any reason why you can't hope and believe that Spurs can do so. I think this game means more to us than it would the average Liverpool player, but Anfield is one of the hardest places to go and get something. But I dream of a point, a draw, not a point there. That would be enough. But we'll see. But should we finish off with some score predictions, maybe? And you'll be there, right, John? You'll be, I'm assuming, as you go away every week in the league. Will you be at the cup games away as well?
Will be at both the games. Well, the first time I went to Liverpool, we were 2-0 up at half time, and this was when we had this terrible record of not having won there since the Titanic sunk. And we were 2-0 up at half time, and I thought, yes, I'm going to see us win. And then Toshak and Keegan scored 3 in the second half. So that gave me a good lesson. And I mean, Jennings saved 2 penalties there on a Good Friday once, and we still only managed a 0-0 draw. And I've seen us lose 7-0 there and all sorts of score lines. But I have seen us win and I have seen us draw. And there's heart and head here. Head tells me we will get knocked out, but my heart is clinging to the fact that you've just raised, that this is such a massive game for the players and also the club, but also the 6,000 fans that are going up there that will make one hell of a noise. And I'm hoping that is a game changer. In the counter to that is it is a big game for Arne Slot. This is a chance of a first trophy for him.
Yeah. Well, and Arne is an excellent manager as well. He was our first choice for a reason, I think. And I'm delighted with that, by the way. But I was in hindsight, you can see why so many clubs wanted Slot and what brilliant he's done. But Deej, what are you saying? What's your heart versus your head?
I think I'm in a pretty similar boat. I think my head is telling me that Liverpool are probably still the best team in the world on form at the moment. It means you're not really gonna favor anybody, especially not a team that's got our injury record and has our current form essentially. But stranger things have happened. We've lost games that we're supposed to win all the time. I'm very familiar with that feeling. So hopefully it's Liverpool that feels that on Thursday. So I think I can't see us keeping another clean sheet, but I think we can scrounge a scrappy draw, scrappy 1-1 on the night that would send us through.
So we're going for score draws and a victory, are we? Is that our consensus? Got to believe. Score draw and a victory over the 2 legs. And yeah, and we're going to take it all the way. I think you've got to believe that. Going to beat Newcastle at Wembley in the final. They've got to travel further. We've got advantage Spurs. Cool. Well, look, thanks so much for joining us, John. And as I mentioned at the start, John used to be a part of the Tottenham Tribute Trust, which, believe it or not, footballers weren't always paid thousands of pounds a week. There was a time where they were doing it more as a hobby that became a very popular hobby for spectators. And I was going to touch on it earlier, John, but the Irvine Scholar era you mentioned, he was the one who was the first chairman to realise you can take money out of a football club, and got around, I think it was law, was it 43, which meant you weren't supposed to make profit off football clubs. He found a way of navigating that and taking money out of clubs. And that changed the game forever. We saw money influx into the game like never before, and footballers became very rich as a consequence to that, which is great for footballers of that era. But before that, they didn't do so well. So if you want to support that charity, it's still a thing, and you'll be helping some people who contributed a massive amount of their lives to Tottenham, and could do with a little support from the fans now, just to keep things ticking and a roof over their head in many cases. So yeah, check out the Tottenham Tribute Trust. You can find it, just Google it, I guess it'll appear up somewhere, but I'll try to find the link and pop it in this as well. But we all finish with an up the Spurs, John and Deej, don't we? So up the Spurs and roll on Thursday.
Come on, you Spurs.
Spurs, definitely.